Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. Appreciate those of you who are listening on demand. Hopefully, some of you have checked us out for our live episodes. We are recording live every Thursday at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. This is a very special on-demand episode of Sales Pipeline Radio that you're likely finding through our podcast feed at iTunes Store or the Google Play Store, so thank you very much for that. Or potentially from the on-demand library of all past, present, and future episodes at salespipelineradio.com. Very, very excited to have with us here today Byron Matthews. He's the president and CEO of the Miller Heiman Group and also the author of the new book, Sales Enablement, a master framework to engage, equip, and empower a world-class sales force. So Byron, thanks again so much for joining us today.
Matt, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So talk a little bit about, you've with your role at Miller Heiman, obviously you've seen quite the evolution of what's happening in sales and really the rise in sales and enablement as a function. I feel like even just 4 years ago or so, like the term barely existed, and now all of a sudden, right. We're seeing like you guys are sharing some information on that. Companies are investing at a rate of 26% more on last year. 59% of organizations now have a sales enablement function, but there's still a gap there, right? There's still, even though we're seeing a rise in the understanding and even formality of sales enablement, we're still seeing a gap between that and actually generating results. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing on that front today.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's by far the fastest growing trend, I would say, in the world of selling is this emergence of sales enablement, and it's really trying to get after the gap between performance and really, buyers getting better at buying much faster than sellers are getting better at selling, and that gap's increasing, and sales enablement is really what's trying to fill that. But a couple things. One is it's happened so fast. As you said, 60% of organizations have it. Just a couple of years, that was in half. But it's happened so fast that it's been a bit haphazard. There really hasn't been a lot of structure around what is enablement, how to really do it well, how to get value out of it, how to drive value inside the sales organization. People are just kind of throwing things at it. There's been a common thread of, services that they go after and kind of how they organize themselves. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing is, because it's harder to sell today, because buyers have changed so quickly, and traditional selling models are still trying to kind of penetrate and work against that changing buyer model. It's gotten harder. So to me, when I think about the greatest sales enablement the greatest sales enablement functions, what they do really, really well is they're kind of, again, transforming that traditional sales model, outside sales model, to what we consider kind of the new generation. And that new generation, the biggest difference is how they engage buyers. It's not just about asking questions. It's not just about understanding the needs, albeit that is incredibly important still, but it's about how do you really inspire that buyer? How do you truly add value? How do you really educate them? How do you honestly take control of the buying process? And that requires a level of sophistication from a seller that really enablement is trying to drive. And so the ones that really, are getting it right, they're going after it through content. How do you turn a seller into a content marketer? How do you give them, and equip them with data and analytics and insights, real time, specific to a customer example? Again, the enablement functions that truly understand how to do that with speed are the ones that are being successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Byron Matthews, the president, CEO of Miller Heiman. And, you've been with Miller Heiman now for about 5 years, and you were in an operational sales leadership role before that. Talk a little bit about how quickly this has evolved. Even if we didn't call it sales enablement, I imagine some of these functions existed before. And for companies that might not be on maybe the early adopter leading edge of adopting sales enablement, what are some signs from the past, from your past, or signs that companies should be looking for internally that should tell them that they need to step up and think about really adopting a formal sales enablement function?
Well, actually, you brought up a good point. In lieu of having sales enablement, it doesn't mean that these things don't still happen. They just happen in silos. So if you think about the core of sales enablement, providing content or or technology, sales enablement tools, or training services or coaching services. Well, without sales enablement, what was happening before? Well, HR would jump in and they would help, and that would be, the customer, or you would have marketing coming in helping with the content, or IT would come in. So it was these kind of point solutions essentially, and it really wasn't. What sales enablement does is it provides that strategic lens around everything, organizes everything, and it directly links it to a plan to better drive additional performance in a sales organization. For me, it was my time at Mercer. I mean, I was head of sales at Mercer. We were driving a large transformation program, and it meant more than one thing. We weren't just putting in, at the time I got exposed to Heiman, frankly, we weren't just putting in a methodology for 6,000 people. We weren't just changing some roles or looking at compensation or putting in a new whole coaching program. We actually had to do it together, thoughtfully. They all connected to each other. They're all independent, they all had dependencies in terms of when you did one, how it impacted the other. And at that time, I was thinking, wow, this idea of bringing these things together was hard. It was actually more difficult because we had the function areas like HR and marketing, those are just kind of driving forward. And it was something that I remember thinking, we had to put dedicated people around this to make sure to work on behalf of sales to make sure that it was all orchestrated correctly. But I'll tell you, the results were profound. I mean, for me, as a sales leader, this is why I'm in the job today, and this is why Heiman's made all the investments that it's made. It was the game changer. I mean, we did all of this right on the heels, right before the economy crashed in 08. And literally, our strategy in 09, 010 was let's just outsell everybody. We just did this large program. We just rolled all this out. We're ready. And, we punched above our weight, and we literally grew sales in 09 and grew sales in 10 when our competitors were, minus double digits. And it's because all of this stuff came together at the right time. So that's why I believe in it so much. And that's when I came on board at Heiman. This is why we've made all the investments to kind of reinvent ourselves, much beyond a training company. It's something that we believe deeply in terms of, the broad needs of sales organizations today.
Well, and you gave some good examples of why sales enablement really is very different than other functions. I mean, it's difficult to say, it's a sales function or it's a marketing function. It's not a slam dunk where its own. I mean, I think sales enablement is when executed well, it's very cross-functional. It requires a level of orchestration across different elements. Talk about how companies do that best. I mean, who should be the champion, or maybe some organizations, is there is opportunity for someone in the organization to benefit the perception of their organization by stepping up and doing this? But then how do you manage that effectively in a cross-functional way?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and you've really touched on an important aspect of what makes some of these initiatives and organizations work well and when it doesn't. We dedicate a whole chapter around even the collaboration component of sales enablement. That alone is so important. So yes, it's cross-functional. It's the only way this works. If you think about sales organization as the client of HR or marketing or IT, all its different, functional areas that they need. Sales enablement, again, is the wrapper around it. It really works best when it lives inside of sales. It does not work best when it lives inside of sales operations. It's different than sales operations. It's not about comp, territory design, or implementing the tools. This is the strategy. This is I understand exactly where the needs are of our buyers, how they're evolving, how they're changing, how that works. And then I deeply, deeply understand the capabilities of our sales team, and I am dedicated to solve that gap. And it starts with, and again, some of this is going to sound very traditional, but when companies overlook it, they fail. It starts with understanding and defining my charter, being very clear to everyone in the organization, this is what this gap is, and this is how we're dedicated, how we are dedicated in solving it. And from there, I need your help from an IT standpoint. I need your help from a marketing standpoint. I need your help from a HR, whatever it might be. And a roadmap is put in place where very specific needs are addressed at the exact right time that is incredibly transparent. So the best companies will put a steering committee around this. They'll talk about this charter. They'll talk about the roadmap. They'll have metrics around sales performance tied to each one of those milestones. And so everyone understands how they help and when they help. And there's full transparency around the results along the way. It's actually, again, it sounds very kind of not pedestrian, but that makes a lot of sense. But actually really hard to do. And it takes a lot of executive sponsorship to buy into this, to carve out the time, to make sure that there's room to operate the discipline required to actually pull something like that off.
So let's talk a little bit about the book. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've seen quite a bit of content come out, sort of really trying to describe and sort of help create a blueprint for companies to really take advantage of sales enablement. This may be the first time I've seen a full-sized, a full-fledged book created. Your new book, Sales Enablement, a Master Framework to Engage, Equip, and Empower a World-Class Sales Force. Talk a little about where this book came to be, how you guys decided to write a book, and how this is different from a lot of the other literature out there on sales enablement.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, honestly, it started with 2 years of research. So this was something that we didn't take lightly. It was like, oh, there's a trend. Let's throw a book out. That's actually not what happened. We felt the trend 2 years ago and started doing an annual kind of research study dedicated around sales enablement. So we researched 300 companies and really understood who has enablement, who doesn't. What, when they do they outperform the others? Yes, they do. Okay, this is actually now really important. What do they do? How do they do it? When does it work? When does it not? And so we learned all of this kind of after the first year. And then before we even jumped into writing, we said, okay, we need another year of this to really understand, are there anomalies? Are there things like what can we declare as best practice and feel really good about that, backed by a couple years worth of research. So then we did the next year, which was last year's research. So 16 and 17. And then when 17 results even empowered the initial 16 results, we knew we were onto something big here. And again, we frenetically could have thrown something together in the beginning of 16, but just didn't feel right about it. But when we started actually putting pen to paper last year, we just really, really have confidence now about what good looks like, or frankly, what great looks like as it relates to what are the services that really power sales enablement? Because again, when we looked at these companies, there really is lots of people do things very differently. Like some have brought compensation inside of sales enablement. Well, when we really double click on that, that's honestly a best practice for sales operations, not enablement. So we really feel confident now about what is and defines sales enablement in terms of success, how to organize it. Like I said, dedicating a chapter just around collaboration and how to, work within a cross-functional team, putting templates in place. We harvested the best of what we thought organizations did in terms of tools and templates and kind of provide all of that stuff as part of our package in the book. It just took some time, but again, something we feel really proud to stand behind.
Love it. So book coming out in May. We will have links to pre-order that book in the notes for this episode, but definitely check that out. Sales Enablement by our guest today, Byron Matthews. I mean, we're still clearly early in the adoption maturation of sales enablement, but we are far along. I think we're already seeing, we're seeing success stories, but we're also seeing some missteps when it comes to companies executing sales enablement. What are some of the common reasons why people stumble out of the gate or stumble in executing sales enablement programs that our listeners can maybe watch for and try to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, there's some common sense stuff, but not always common practice. So I'm going to say some things that you're like, okay, makes sense, but then people just don't do it. So here's examples. I kind of alluded to this before. When it's very frenetic, when people hire a sales enablement director or someone responsible for sales enablement with maybe a few resources around it, but with no clear charter, with no clear path, it just says, it's almost like the old kind of sales effectiveness roles that lived out there, where it was just make us better, or we just need to improve sales. It goes back to the fundamentals that are missed up in the beginning, which is sales enablement teams have to be so passionate and so dedicated to learn two very, very important things. One, what are the real and honest buying processes today? How do our buyers behave today? What is unique about them? How, what are some of the common threads? What are the needs that they have? And then second, what truly are the capabilities of my sales organization? And understanding that gap is everything. That provides the roadmap necessary to then define and declare the role. And once people, human beings that actually are in these roles can do that well, it's gold, because they can now walk into any room, any executive, and talk about how to get to greatness and what the gaps are and what's preventing us from breaking through whatever it might be. Or even if they're in growth mode where they're doing really well, it's here's how we can get to the next gear. And so without that understanding, they oftentimes fail. They jump way too tactical, way too soon. And that's probably the biggest issue that I see in terms of some of the effectiveness that kind of lost their way in terms of a real powerful story and a purpose. And then again, I would argue there's a bit of a courage aspect to it. Corporate courage sometimes gets in the way, in the sense where the ones that even do kind of figure out what's going on, you got to take the courage to drive change. I mean, sales organizations must be agile today. That's a fact. Buyers are incredibly innovative. They're moving fast. They're changing quickly. Now, I get it. It's easy for them to change. It's harder for sales organizations to change. That's a big decision to make. The reality is, because buyers have innovated much faster, they have much more data in their hands. They're able to make decisions quicker. They're able to shut out salespeople much further along than they used to. The truth is that this sales organization, they need to change fast too. And so sales enablement is empowered to do that. When they don't do that, when they're way too tactical, I think they oftentimes miss it.
Wrapping up here with Byron Matthews, President and CEO of Heiman. Definitely check out his new book, Sales Enablement. It's coming out in May. Last question I want to ask you, we ask a lot of our guests is, as you've kind of grown in your sales and leadership career, who are some of the people that you learned the most from? They can be authors, speakers, they can be dead or alive. Who are some of the biggest inspirations that have in your career and growth that you'd recommend other people checking out as well?
Well, honestly, for me, it's a thing that surprised you, but Bob Miller was quite inspirational in terms of I've had a chance to. When I became CEO, he was still kind of connected to our business, but he would go to some of our client events and he really, if you think about solution selling as a concept, needs-based selling, consultative selling, I'd argue he was the pioneer of that. And so he was somebody that I really just enjoyed listening to and learning from. Other than that, I'll tell you, obviously, Neil Rackham was a big chance to get to know him a bit in terms of just the pure science. I think he was one of the pioneers of just really putting science inside of sales in a very, very early on when 95% of everybody made that up, but arguably vast majority of everybody believed sales was just an art. And then the people that you don't know, that just, to me, great sellers, when you really get to know somebody who's just an amazing seller, you can learn so much from them in terms of how they process things and how they think. And I've got a long list of those folks.
Awesome. All right. So I said that was the last question. I do have one more question. Cubs or Sox?
Yeah. Cubs, for sure.
All right. That's good.
Yeah.
No, that's the right answer. That's totally fine. Okay, I guess my follow-up would be like, what's wrong with the Cubs? It's mid-April, and maybe it's just cold, and this looked like last year. But and as a Cubs fan myself, I'm a little worried.
They're still stuck in the winter. It's too cold here. Once it turns warm and they feel like it's baseball season, they'll kick it in.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, it's still Bears weather in Chicago right now. I think I saw the wind chill is like 20
Exactly.
degrees, and that's not conducive for hitting or catching or any kind of the regular baseball activity. So it'll get
No,
better. The
sir.
weather's going to warm up. Wrigley's going to be beautiful. The Cubs are going to win, and we're going to sing "Go Cubs Go" a lot more this summer. But
I
until
hope
we
so.
do, thank you so much again to our guest for joining us today, Byron Matthews, CEO, President of Miller Heiman. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this special episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. Make sure you check out his new book, Sales Enablement. Check that out on Amazon. We'll put a link in the notes for this podcast. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on a future episode, Sales Pipeline Radio.